Hey guys, so today I'm really excited because we're starting out a new series, and it's actually gonna be hopefully be a series I can continue for a while. I can only do it with your help though, because as you'll see over here, that I have a I have a Dropbox, a Google form that you can fill out with your deck lists, and I will go over them just like I do in this video. Now, I have this first deck. I'm I'm pointing towards the deck, uh, but it's not the right screen. So I have this first deck over here, supplied to be supplied to me by a high school friend, Jonathan Pierce, and really, it seems like an interesting list, and I'm excited. He told like you'll notice a bit of a difference between the first list and then the next one. And you'll see I have a lot of tabs open, and that is because of different decks and different cards I'm going to point out. Now, before we start, I'm going to really quickly go over my Google form so all of you know how this works. So in the description, I'm going to be leaving this on YouTube. I'm gonna be uploading this to YouTube, and in the description there will be this link. Now, what you can do is you can go to this link, and you can actually you're gonna fill out your email so that you can get a notification whenever your video is posted or uploaded to YouTube. You're gonna put your username. You can remain anonymous if you'd like, but if you have a really cool deck, who knows? Maybe you want to take credit for it. Now, this this particular deck that we're starting off with is Pioneer, and I really like I like formats that allow me to use more cards. My favorite is Modern because it gives you a lot of cards you can use without getting to the absolute ridiculousness of like Legacy or Vintage. And Modern actually has different things you can do, where Vintage and Legacy, there's really not a lot you can do unless you're staying meta. So Modern gives a deck builder like me a lot more to work with, and Pioneer is very close to that. Pioneer is also much cheaper because we don't have fetch lands in it. Now, for this first list, we have Pioneer. You'll notice that as you fill this up, there there are just commander variants like Commander, Historic Brawl, Brawl. I don't have Oathbreaker here. That's something I can add if people show interest. Um, I will not show gameplay for Commander variant decks unless it is a very consistent, very concentrated deck list, because I don't want to be showing you gameplay for a list that basically your game's gonna change every single game because you don't get the same cards. Where if there's a deck like Prime Speaker Vanifar where you're constantly looking through your deck with your commander, that's very consistent. You can hit that every game. Otherwise, I'm gonna stay away from gameplay for EDH variants. There's a game mode because there's tournament best of one, best of three, and then there's Magic Arena best of one, best of three. Magic Arena and tournament metas are very different, and that is because in paper the cards actually have to be available, where online all you need are the wild cards. The next is, what are you looking from me? This is where you might where most of your attention might draw, because it's what do you want from me exactly? Why are you here? And he seems to want to know whether or not his deck is viable. He wants me to give him card and feedback suggestions, and he wants to see my take on his deck. I will be doing all three of those things separately. I have a second version of his deck that seems to be fairly different. I have cards that if he wants to keep his deck relatively same to what it is right now, that he can include. And then I have whether or not I think his deck is viable. And once I pull up his list, I will go over that. Next up, we have your deck list. Now, what you need to do here is you really please spell the name correctly. Don't put a card into here that is not going to be spelled correctly. If you do, I had to spend more time going through it and correcting them. Which around the start, I currently have a lot of free time now, but I may not in the future. So when I'm going through these deck lists, please make sure that your deck, each of the card names has proper punctuation, proper spelling, just so that I don't have to go and reformat it. Now the next is something I added right after this deck, which is the only reason why I know exactly kind of how this deck works or what it's trying to do is because I went up against it and then he submitted it. So this deck, I added this area right here that tells you, that's going to tell me actually what your deck's supposed to do. If you're playing something like Gruul Beatdown or Mono Red Aggro, Mono Red Burn, cool. I don't really need something from you describing what that does. But if it's something that's a tad more complicated, then you can leave a little description right over here, and that will help me out a lot while trying to figure out what you're trying to do, or while trying to make card suggestions while keeping your theme. Sideboard deck list, if applicable. He doesn't have one yet, and he said up here that he is doing best of three, which means that when I adjust the deck, I will be supplying a sideboard based off of the decks that I see are in the meta. Now, for this entire thing, I will be using MTG Goldfish meta just for my sanity. I will be not necessarily picking what's in the top of the meta on Goldfish. I'll just be using their deck lists. I'll be using what I know by playing the format. Now, I've tested this deck. I have not recorded the gameplay because I was still kind of tinkering around with it. Now, the next one is just a shameless plug in my own thing, which is, are you subscribed to my YouTube channel? Because when you are subscribed to my YouTube channel, you get those notifications of when your deck list is going to come out. And that's very important so that you can stay up to date. Now, moving on to his deck list, we have this. Now, I don't know how well you can actually see it, so I apologize if you can't. But we have what really kind of looks like a standard Aristocrats deck. So we have Garrison Cats, Cleric of... Wow, I can't even read that. We have Clerics of the... Wow, I really can't read. Cleric of Life's Bond, Corpse Knight, Cruel Celebrant, Malakir Blood Priest, Core Celebrant. Wow, there's Core Celebrant and Cruel Celebrant. That's kind of a... I never said these names out loud, okay? Then we have Blight Priest, which... Okay, just gonna say this right now. When you're writing out names like this, make sure you double check their names, because not every vampire has blood in their name. He submitted it as Marauding Blood Priest, and I had to look the card up because it has blight in its name, not blood. Now, what this kind of looks like is, I'm going to ignore the lands down here for now. Expedition Healer is just down here. First off, my first note is that the deck he submitted is not 60 cards. I don't require you to submit a 60 card deck. You can submit a partial deck if you'd like. I think he just messed up because I don't know, he just left it out. Anyway, this deck maxes out at 3 mana, so 20 does not seem too bad for lands. I would probably say, actually, that's not even 20, that's 19. So I would say 20, 21 is where he wants to be. With the number of 3-drops he has being... Actually, his 3-drop count is pretty high. He has 14. Yeah, he has 14 3-drops. So I would honestly probably go to 22 or 23 lands automatically right off that. But But really what this deck looks like it's trying to be doing here is it looks like it's trying to mix Vampire Tribal with Cleric Tribal, and then it's also just trying to go with the Aristocrat theme of gaining life, losing life. Now I contacted John, and I asked him certain things about this deck and certain things he wanted to keep. Now, this original list deck idea belongs to John, and I turned it into a bit of I turned it into something else. Really, all he wanted to do with this list was he just wanted to take Vito, the Thorn of the Dusk Rose, and he wanted to just make his ability dumb. And this is in Pioneer, so we don't have the infinite combo that it gets with whatever the one card is. Anyway, so we can't go infinite, but we can do some pretty nutty stuff. So what I did was I dropped Cleric Tribal, I dropped White in general, and I dropped Aristocrats because what I believe the strongest way to play Vito in Pioneer, which my personal opinion is to play it as mono black vampires. Now you'll notice that my lands are interesting, but right off the bat I did take white out of the deck. I added in Knight of Ebon Legion just for a turn one card that it's just a really powerful card, and it a lot of the time will absolutely be triggering that ability with not trigger yeah triggering that ability at the end step to put a one counter on it. Now the next card we have up here, hidden behind Blight Priest, is Dusk Legion Zealot. It's another vampire to give us card draw. It does make us lose a life, but that is 100% worth it. I also have Rotting Blight Priest here, kind of as a fifth copy of Vito. Because the original list only ran 3 Vitos, but it had more cards that it had more cards that just gained life, lost life, and in general just did that sort of thing. And this list is different, and so I decided that going up to 4 of those and then going to 1 Blight Priest would be the way to go. It's just that Vito is more powerful in the aspect that they lose that much life rather than they just lose 1 life. So if you have a creature that's like, for example, Gifted Aetherborn, which is just a disgusting card, by the way, a 2/3 for 2 Death Touch lifelink, we're going to be getting 2 life off of that card. And so, though it sounds small, that extra life that we would make them lose off of Gifted Aetherborn with Vito over Blight Priest is really powerful. Next we have Silver Smoke Ghoul. It's here because it's a vampire. It has nutty synergy with just life gain in general, and it has a specific combo in this deck that I will talk about when we get there. But this card right here, it's just recurring card draw. It's just keeps coming back. It's a 3/1 vampire. It's just disgusting. Now, the next card here, the main card of the deck, I don't really want to fly over it for those people who don't actually know how the card works. It's a 3-drop 1/3 vampire that says whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. Pay 5 mana, creatures you control gain lifelink until end of turn. So when you do that, your Silver Smokes will gain lifelink, your Aetherborns will get second lifelink, everything's going to get lifelink. And that's important because that basically doubles your damage. And that will make sure that you get damage in even if they block. Because you're still going to gain that much life, so you're still going to be gaining that much life, so you're still going to be dealing that much life with the Vito. Now, if Vito's killed before it triggers, before combat damage is dealt, obviously you're kind of screwed. But this list is built so that you don't absolutely fumble when Vito dies. There is a bit of an argument to be said if you want to go up on the Marauding Blight Priests, because there are 5 copies. You could go down to 3 vetoes, 2 Blight Priests. You could really tinker around with it a lot because you can have multiple Blight Priests out and their stats are 3/2 while vetoes are 1/3. It's just veto will block a lot more of the stuff that will come at you in Pioneer or just formats in general. The difference between 2 and 3 or 3 and 4 toughness is astronomical. Now, the next card over here is Champion of the Dust. You can't really see it, but I'll actually pull it up right here. When Champion of Dusk enters the battlefield, you draw X cards and you lose X life, where X is the number of vampires you control. Now, this card is it's just gonna be a way to refill your board. It's gonna be a way to refill your hand. Now, that's in there because it's, as you see, we have a lot of vampires. And all those vampires are going to be acting as an additional card that we can draw with that. Next up, we have something that's going to pair up amazingly with Veto. Next, we have Sanctum Seeker. Whenever a vampire you control attacks, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. If you have Veto out, that reads, whenever a vampire you control attacks, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 1 life. Now, multiply that by how many vampires we have, and that number goes up very quickly. I only have it as a 2 of in here, though, because it is a 4-drop and you don't want to get too clunky. The only reason I have 3 Champion of Dusks is because it refills our hand. Next up, we have Eliminate. You can really tinker around with the removal in this deck. I just went with what I wanted, what I prefer. So I went with 3 Fatal Pushes and 2 Eliminates. Eliminate is able to get rid of Planeswalkers, which aren't really relevant right now in the meta, but it's also just generally a really good card right now. And then I went with 3 Fatal Pushes because it's also a very powerful card. Destroying a creature with convert mana cost 2 or less, and if you activate Revolt, which isn't too difficult, you have 6 cards in this deck that can activate Revolt, and I'll get to that in a moment. So when it's revolted, you can destroy a creature with convert mana cost 4 or less, which is really high, and it's going to hit most of the creatures in Magic. Now, the next one is a card that actually combos with Silver Smoke Ghoul, which I'm going to go over all of the abilities of Sorin Imperious Bloodlord. If you're unfamiliar with him, he says, +1, target creature you control gains Death Touch and lifelink until end of turn. If it's a vampire, you put a 1 counter on it. That's going to be a very nice way to, 1, give us extra veto triggers with that lifelink. It's going to discourage the opponent from blocking if we put it onto a smaller creature. Let's say we put it onto our, what is it even called? Put it onto our Zealots, because they're just 1/1s, and if we give it Death Touch and Lifelink, then that's just going to be a free damage every turn. And if we have Veto, it's 2 damage and it's Death Touch, and if they go to block it, they're losing a creature. And then the extra +1/+1 counter on it makes it even more powerful, because we can put that onto one of our creatures that we don't want to die. For example, if we have the Blight Priest out with 2 toughness, we can do this, and then it's safe from shock. Plus, it has a second +1, which says you may sacrifice a vampire. When you do, Sorin deals 3 damage to any target, and you gain 3 life. Now, this is the part of him that combos with the Silver Smoke Ghoul. But I'm going to go over his last ability, and then I'll hop back over the main deck list. So, -3 is you may put a vampire creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. Now, this is a way that we can cheat out the 4 and 5 drops in our deck. So we can take that 5-drop that refills our hand, and we can play it down for free, and then we redraw a new hand, and that's going to be very powerful. I considered going up to 4 of the 5-drop of the of Champion of Dusk, just so that we could get that extra card draw for free. I just don't want to draw too many of them because at that point we're drawing into more of them rather than into other cards. Now the second ability says you can sacrifice a vampire. When you do, he deals 3 and you gain 3. So going back to the original deck, well, to this deck list, we have Silver Smoke Ghoul, which says at the beginning of your end step, if you gain 3 or more life this turn, return Ghoul from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So what you can do is you can sacrifice Silver Smoke Ghoul. You can deal 3 damage to any target. You can gain 3 life, and then it's going to come back at the end of your turn anyway. So it's very powerful. If you want to do this, you can. If you want to just sacrifice it for 2 mana and draw a card, and then you have cards like Sanctum Seeker or the other life gain cards in your deck, you're going to be able to return it to your hand anyway. So that's why this is in here, and it's very powerful. Then we have the lands. Now I have 21 lands in this deck, 22 lands, and I would make it higher if I planned on casting my 5 or 4 drop. Hopefully, like I'm planning on getting to like 4 mana. If I need 5 mana, I can probably find it in this deck. I have enough card draw. But the point is that even though I have 4 and 5 drops, and my 3 drop is kind of heavy, I'm not actually planning on casting a lot of those cards. I'm just gonna use Sorin to cheat it out. Now you'll notice that I have swamps, but I have Castle Locthwains. Those are for card draw. It's just a really good card. Some of the castles, like the blue one, I know that CGB and I agree that the blue one is very late game. Not even late game. If you play it and you're able to activate it, it's because you're losing. And so it doesn't really bring you back. Where this actually gives you card draw. It can put you back into the game. It can put you further ahead in the game. You're going to be gaining enough life that you could even activate this with like 4 or 5 cards in hand and not care. Because you'll lose that much life. But you're going to be gaining so much life that it won't matter. Now, I have 2 Mutavaults because it's a land that you can pay 1 to turn it into a creature. And it becomes a 2/2 creature with all creature types. So that's going to include Vampire. And this is a staple right here in basically any tribal deck you'll find. I think it's very powerful, and I think any tribal deck should run, almost any tribal deck should run it. The next, you'll see I have 2 copies of Fabled Passage. This was a last-minute add-in, actually. I added this in, like 10 minutes before I started this video, and the reason why it's in here is so that you have something that you can trigger Revolt with, because you have your ghouls, but that requires you to sacrifice your ghouls, which will draw you cards. But really what you want to do is you want to be able to sacrifice your ghoul and have another way to trigger Revolt. So I as a modern player wanted to toss in fetch lands, but I couldn't because it's Pioneer. But Fabled Passage is going to be a good secondary. Now, I only put it in as a 2 of because I like untapped lands, and like I don't want to just rely too much on trying to get to that 4th land. So there are 2 of them to trigger Revolt. Now you look at the sideboard. There are Feed the Swarms, Cletuses, Murderous Riders, Legion End, 3 Leyline of the Voids, 1 Ritualosa, and 2 Liliana, Waker of the Deads. Now the reasons these are in here are because I looked at the top decks in the meta, and then I looked at what I was playing against, and really the Leyline of the Voids, I was playing against a lot of Oops All Spells in Pioneer. Now, Oops All Spells in Pioneer is it's interesting. I'll pull up the list right here. So, it's very interesting. It looks like just an 80-card dredge deck, where you're trying to get prized amalgams. You have things to search out your spy or informer, but basically you just mill your entire deck, and you'll see their sideboard: 4 Abrupt Decays, 4 Leyline of Sanctities, 4 Leyline of the Voids, and then 1 of each of these. Now that's kind of wonky, I'm not gonna lie. Having 3 4-ofs in your sideboard is kind of, it's kind of strange to see, but in a deck like theirs where it's 80 cards, because wait, is this version 80 cards? I think it is. Yeah, which is interesting because I don't see a Yorion. The version I usually see has a Yorion probably in place of this Reclamation Sage. And so usually what's going to happen is they need to be able to flip over their deck and find the right card. And they need to be able to protect that. Anyway, you will have Leyline of the Voids in here to protect that. You have you have that so that it's harder for them to combo off, and by the time they get rid of this and try to combo off, you'll probably this deck is so fast that you'll probably overpower them. Um, let's see. I have Ritual of Soot in here just in case a deck goes too wide, like Oops All Spells. They don't have anything that gives haste, so if they do all of that, you can just board wipe them and you're safe, and then they're screwed. Um, Murderous Riders are for more removal. It's not a vampire itself. It's just a really powerful removal spell that turns into a creature eventually. Uh, Feed the Swarm is for enchantment or destruction or more creature destruction. If you're bringing these in, you're probably taking out Eliminates. Kalidases are there for similar strategies, for aristocrat strategies, other creature-based strategies. If you're bringing in Kalidases, I recommend bringing in more removal. Lilianas are in there to give us a secondary way of like pressuring the board, because sometimes we'll go against a strategy that really makes us struggle, like Sultai Reclamation. Now, it's a lot to take in here. And so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to bring in the Lilianas so that you can hopefully resolve it. Assuming you resolve it, then you're going to start to pick away at their hand. Now, the only things that can actually deal with Liliana in their main board is a Sinister Sabotage, Censor, and Shark Typhoon. I guess Uro as well, but if Uro's out, then you're kind of screwed. But really, if your spell resolves, you're in the safe. You're safe. You're gonna do just fine. If Liliana ensures they have an Uro, you have enough. You have enough chump blockers. I think those were the three big decks. Oh wait, this is another deck. Mono Black is probably going to be your hardest competitor behind Sultai Reclamation, and that's just because of how fast it is compared to us. Like, we're not the fastest deck in the world. We're still fast, but we're not really very fast. Um, this deck definitely goes under us, and what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're bringing in those Leyline of the Voids, we're bringing in those Lilianas, we're bringing in Kalidases, and the reason is because if we can get rid of their graveyard synergy, then Bloodsoaked Champion, Dread Wanderer, Scrapheap Scrounger, this has an interesting synergy with it. Those cards all become useless. And so, really, that's kind of just a way that we try to counter it. You'll notice they have 4 Mutavaults. They have Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. I considered adding Urborg into this. It's just that we don't have enough cards in our deck to really care about it, and I don't want to really give our opponents swamps on the chance that they are mana screwed and black deprived, because if we do that, then we're fixing their mana base for them. And so, though Urborg is a good card, I would say be careful of when you use it. That's it for the matchups, though. He didn't request any gameplay, so I didn't do any extra gameplay. In fact, that made it a lot easier to record this, and I'm gonna be uploading this to YouTube. And when I do, I will supply you guys with the deck list. You can also just go to, MTG Goldfish and look up Maelstrom's Legends YT, and then you'll see my account and you'll see my deck lists, and you can go there to look at it. If you go to, I believe it's also Maelstrom Legends on Tapped Out, you can see other deck lists. This is not currently on there though. But that's it for the deck. I do have a few card suggestions if John wants to keep the deck to be like white black and just kind of just to really keep it how it is. Like I changed it a lot, but like I did exactly what he wanted. What he told me is he just wanted to make Veto dumb, and I did. But if you want to keep the strategy, John or anyone watching this, what you can do is I really recommend taking out Malkir Blood Priest. It's not a good card in this deck. I wish it were. It's just not. You don't have a lot of synergy within your own cards. Replace Core Celebrant with any of the cards that do the same thing for less mana. I know that there's Impassioned Orator, and if you have Impassioned Orator, then that's 2 mana for a 2/2 that does the same thing. I know that this says it's a 1/4, and that is going to be important when you're blocking and stuff. But really, I think you want to go Impassioned Orator. I would take out Blood Priest, Celebrant. I would take out the Expedition Healers. I just wouldn't play them. Because you're not going Cleric Tribal, really. Like, you kind of have Cleric Tribal. I also might take out Garrison Cats for something that does something else. I do have 3 card suggestions if you want to stay white-black and if you want to do Aristocrat style. Don't do any specific tribe. That's my suggestion. Because if you don't, then you open up yourself to a card like Zulaport Cutthroat. Now, Zulaport Cutthroat, what it says is whenever it or another creature you control dies, each opponent loses life and you gain life. Now, that's going to add to the cards in your deck that already say stuff like that, and then you're going to be able to do a lot more with that. Then what you're going to want to do is your original deck list had nothing that actually just flat out says sacrifice. This lets you sacrifice as many creatures as you want in a turn, and that can, like, you can give it protection, but you can also just activate it a bunch of times so that you can just get a bunch of triggers. Now, if you want to do this, then this can even be how you deal combat damage to your opponent, because you can give it protection from the colors that your opponent's creatures are, and then you just go ahead and swing in. You can also just keep it open and keep grinding it up with your creatures each turn, and that way you're able to just keep dealing damage. Now, third card and the last card suggestion I'm going to make before I skedaddle, because I'm really hungry and I'm going to go eat soon, is Hidden Stockpile. Hidden Stockpile says, Revolt. At the beginning of your end step, if a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn, create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. Pay 1, sacrifice a creature, scry 1. This, though you have to pay mana, gives you another sack outlet, but it also says, okay, let's say you have Zulaport Cutthroat, Cartel Aristocrat, and Hidden Stockpile. What you do is, actually, you don't even need Cartel Aristocrat. Just let's say you have Hidden Stockpile, an untapped land, Zulaport Cutthroat, and a servo. During your turn, you sacrifice the servo with your stockpile. You trigger Zulaport Cutthroat. They lose life. You gain life. You go to your end step, and you recreate a servo because you had a permanent leave the battlefield. So basically, This isn't infinite in one turn, but it gives you this kind of grindy combo feel that's really fun without being unfair to the game. And it's very powerful. When I say it's not unfair to the game, that's not saying that it's not powerful. It still is very powerful. When I played this in standard, it dominated, but this card is what you're going to want to go with if you're kind of wanting to go with a grindy feel to your deck. So these three cards are what I suggest if you're going to want to make it into Aristocrats. And I've hit almost all the bases that you've asked me to, except for whether or not I think this deck is viable. As it is, I don't think it is. I don't think it's a viable deck. I'm not gonna. I'm just gonna be completely honest. I don't think this is. I don't think this is viable. Um, so my computer screen is actually this way, but in order to get it look like I'm pointing at the cards, I have to point over here. That's why you might be confused by my face cam. Um, so this deck, as it is not viable. If you take out the Blood Priests, you take out the Core Celebrants, you take out the Expedition Healers, you make it 60 cards. First off, you should do that. And then you add in Zulaport Cutthroat, Cartel Aristocrat, Hidden Stockpile, maybe move some other cards around. Then you have something to work with. Then that's going to be viable. You can't play Cleric Tribal, Vampire Tribal, and Aristocrats all in the same deck with these cards. I'm not saying that you can't do it in general, because then someone's going to try to prove me wrong, which by all means, send me a list, prove me wrong. But with these cards right here, you're going to have a hard time because they aren't very good with each other. Like, Malakir Blood Priest cares about your party. That's if I'm going to be honest, this looks like a deck that this current list looks like a deck that somebody tried to build a standard deck with and then realized that Cruel Celebrant wasn't in standard. Or Corpse Knight. Either way, I think that if you add in Zulaport Cutthroat, Cartel Aristocrat, Hidden Stockpile, take away the tribal synergies, and add in Mutavault, because that's something you could even turn into a creature and then sacrifice. You could sacrifice a land to get more of an ability. I believe you don't even. You can tap Mutavault to make it. You can tap Mutavault for a mana and make it into a creature that is already tapped, just so you can sacrifice it. And that you would do as like a way to win the game. Just get that extra bit of damage through. But I believe that going mono black was the way to go if you want to emphasize on Vito, if you want him to be the emphasis of your deck. If you just want to go with Aristocrats in general, go with the suggestions I made. Anyway, I hope that you guys enjoyed the video, and if you want to ever submit your own, I'll be tossing the link to the Google form in the YouTube description when this is uploaded. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.